Hello, BookTube. We are doing our 12.9K Q&A, and we are at part 3. And we are up to Joel Swagman. What are your thoughts on prequels? Can they ever be done right, or are they always inherently a bad idea? Are there any examples of good prequels? I don't know of any off the top of my head that are any good. I'm not saying that they're necessarily a bad idea, but I've almost never read them that were worth it, that actually managed to do the trick. I've almost never done that. I've often wished, the prequel that I wish for most of all there's a fantasy series called The Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever, in which a man from our world is transported into a fantasy land and has to save it through the power of his white gold wedding ring that gives him amazing power, or power enough to fight with the evil bad guy of the series. And in those novels, we are told the history of this fantasy land. And one of the key points in that history is the ritual of desecration, which was conducted 1,000 years before by a character called High Lord Kevin Landwaster. And Kevin is not a name from that fantasy land. It doesn't sound like many of the names from that fantasy land. I automatically thought when I first read the books 40 years ago that Kevin was also a person from our world who went there and enacted the ritual of desecration using magic that he himself had developed as an outworlder. And that would be a great prequel. Do that as a trilogy. The Desecration Trilogy by Stephen R. Donaldson. I never got it, and I never will, but I don't even know how that would work. I think from the little that we're told about what that was like, it would make a great story. But no, I've never seen them really done well. Balin 32 has a barrage of questions. Number one, if you were appointed Generalissimo of the U.S. education system with unlimited power for a year, what would you do during that year? Depends on what you mean by unlimited power. If I have unlimited power over the federal government, then I would cancel 2 weapons contracts for the Pentagon and funnel that money into educational resources on state-by-state level. That'd be one thing that I would do, would be to drastically increase the amount of money available for state boards of education. However, I would also do 2 other things. First thing is I would abolish the Department of Education. I don't want that kind of power concentrated in political hands. And second, I would make that gigantic spigot of federal money for state educational boards dependent on whether or not an outside arbiter determines whether or not that state board of education is teaching nonsense. Are you teaching stuff that isn't historical? Are you calling slaves in American history forced migrations? Involuntary guest workers? Are you doing things like that? Are you saying, as they say in Texas, that the United States Constitution was patterned on the laws of Moses? Are you teaching creationism in your science class? Are you teaching discrimination in your sociology classes? Are you telling your young students, are your schools telling your young students to hate and to stigmatize? If you're doing that, if an outside assessor, a federal outside assessor determines you are doing that, he or she will give you a list of things you need to fix. When that list is successful and your second inspection gets you high marks, then you get that money, a huge amount of money, a state-altering amount of money, but only if you are fulfilling your mandate as an educator. But I don't want a federal institution doing that. You can have a federal bursar to disperse that money, but I don't want state boards of education. Or Department of Education does far more harm than good, so I would get rid of that as well. Number 2, what is your view of Simon Heffer's biography of Enoch Powell? I thought it was really good. What is your opinion of the man himself, Enoch Powell? Well, an obviously touchy figure, right? Who's remembered, one of the few people in history who's remembered for one speech as opposed to anything else. It was Heffer's biography that really showed me the 3 dimensions of the man. I think I would probably have liked talking to him. He seems endlessly interesting to me. Number 3, how important was your alma mater in forming you as a person? I ask because I know of several people who, due to COVID and remote learning, only entered their university twice, once to pick up their student ID and once to pick up their diploma. How would something like that have affected you? I've probably been very alien. I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. There's a whole generation of higher education students who don't have an alma mater. They don't have any fond or negative associations with campus, and the features of campus, the things that went on, the picnics, the torrid love affairs, the breakups, all with specific geographical locations in mind. None of that. They don't have any of that. That will change things, won't it? And number 4, do you recommend Matterhorn by Karl Melantes? I do. I always look forward to your uploads, and I hope you stay eternally 23 so you can continue making them forever. Much love from the Low Countries. Oh my, much love right back to the Low Countries. Although I should point out, it would be delusional to say that I'm 23. I am, in fact, 28. Matt Sheridan says, congrats, St. Donoghue on 12.9K. Before you know it, you'll have 20K. This channel will never reach 20K subscribers. My first question is, what is your favorite presidential library that you have visited? I would guess it would have to be Jack Kennedy's, but perhaps Lincoln's. I've never been all that impressed with any presidential library. They all seem like a waste of time. Question number 2. I'm looking to read up on Franco and the Spanish Civil War. Which books would be good jumping off point? I'm not really a good person to ask on the subject. I read Paul Preston's biography of Franco and really liked it. I could certainly recommend that. And number 3, any good book recommendations for the history of the Jesuits? Marcus Friedrich just did a big, fat book. It's 2022 release, and it's English-language translation. That was very good and very comprehensive. It's huge, but your library might have it, or interlibrary loan. You're laying up there panting. Poor thing. Oh, poor baby bean. Maybe, Frida, why don't you come down here? You're not sitting in the sun. That might cool you off. Just don't press next to me. Liam says, do you read only one book at a time through to completion, or do you switch between different books throughout the day? I usually read one book to completion, just on the fainting couch. I'll plow through one, taking notes, then I'll pick up another one and start right away. Let's see here. Consequently, if you happen to switch between books, does that inhibit your reading experience at all? No. I suppose in terms of being able to immerse yourself into a story or ponder over a specific book, I don't do any pondering, but I slip in and out of books very easily. I don't need any kind of insulation like that. Let's see here. Michael Dalloway says, I know you don't count audiobooks, but seeing as I do count audiobooks as a way to so-called consume a book, I definitely do. They're just not reading. I don't understand that. I don't understand why people say audiobooks are reading. I'm not discounting the experience of encountering a book that way, but reading has a definition already, and listening to something is not reading. But that's all. I don't say they don't count. But seeing as many classics were born out of the oral tradition, oh my God. Oh my God. Is there anyone you admire as a good oral storyteller? Related, how does one tell stories or recount tales in a more engaging way? I don't know that it can be taught. It's largely a question of whether or not you have the skill. I think it might be just a question of reading an audience and sensing spoken pacing. So there might be something to us saying that some people are natural-born storytellers, so-called natural-born storytellers. I've never seen anyone get better at it, I guess, is what I'm saying. Nicholas Lasothiakis says, how has Savage Beauty, Millet, not been made into a movie yet? Savage Beauty is a biography of Edna St. Vincent Millay, and movies about writers tend not to do well. Shakespeare in Love notwithstanding. And movies about a poet that 10 people have read? No. It's no surprise to me that it hasn't been made into a movie. Cool Bean says, Steve, could you break down your alien-like 150-page-an-hour reading speed a little more? Is that for rereads? Kindle-sized pages, easy and difficult books, what age and speed did you start reading at? It's 120 to 150 average, depending on it, just for anything. It doesn't go much below that, and it doesn't really matter the size of the page or whether it's a read or a reread. And when did it... I don't know when I reached that number, but it's just practice. That's all. It's just a huge amount of practice. I know you've said to eliminate sub-vocalization. Yes, indeed, those of you who are new to the channel. If you're reading words out loud to yourself silently in your head while you're reading, you're hobbling your reading speed. You don't need to do that. But I found I can only do that with easy books. Any other tips on how to increase speed for more difficult works while still comprehending what is going on? Well, you make it sound like it's a foregone conclusion that you can only do it with easy books. The only reason you can do it with easy books and not with hard books, so to speak, is because you're relearning the habit. You're unlearning an old habit. So of course the easy things will be first. If you keep doing it, all books will fall in line. It works just the same on any level of complexity. Kevin J.N. says, do you ever have reader's anxiety? No, I don't have anxiety of any kind. But I don't know what you mean by reader's anxiety. I mean, do you have a way to deal with so many books that you want to get to, but time is short? Well, but there's so many of everything, right? And time is short. Dunkin' Donuts is going to be making Boston cream pies after I'm dead. And I know that. So I'm going to miss them, right? Seawater will be curling into foam at the seashore at Cape Cod without me putting my toes in the water. I'm going to miss that. That's going to happen, and I'm not going to see it. I'm not going to be there for it. I don't see why that would be a basis for anxiety. I just finished War and Peace, and I also had books building up on what to read. As long as you don't waste time, there's only so much you can do. I have sculpted pretty much my entire life for reading. There's not much more time that I can give to it unless I eliminated booktubing. There's not much more time that I can give to it. So if you're feeling this way about books, maybe give more time to reading. Maybe? That would work. William Fett says, hi, Steve. I have 3 questions. What do you think of Swiss Family Robinson by Johann David Reese? I've never heard this book mentioned on BookTube. Nobody ever talks about Swiss Family Robinson. Jules Verne said it was one of his favorite books and wrote a sequel, The Castaways of the Flag. What is your opinion of his book? What are your thoughts on the dog books of Albert Pace and Terhune? Terhune is bad. And Swiss Family Robinson never did anything for me either, so of course Verne's sequel didn't do anything for me. I don't think I ever read the sequel that Verne wrote, in fact, because Swiss Family Robinson just was a dud for me. I've never understood the appeal. And Terhune books, I like them, but boy, oh boy, boy, oh boy, are they bad. Angela Gray says, hi, Steve. I have a 20-year-old daughter who loved Jacqueline Wilson as a child, but doesn't really read now. Any ideas to tempt her back? I imagine she'd enjoy some modern romance story. I'm going to need to know more than that. A lot more than that. I take book recommendations very, very seriously. I don't want to make a blanket recommendation based on one name, knowing nothing about the person. Feel free to email me, but I don't have enough to go on here. Anthony Suppa says, have you ever been inside the Oval Office? Yes. Yes, I have. If so, what were the circumstances that brought you there? The times that I was in the Oval Office, I had a odd but close relationship with someone who admitted me. Jasper Antonelli says, which important people alive today would have a really good biography once they're dead? No way to know. Could be a totally trivial figure that gets a great biography. Our Man did. A relative footnote. A book called Our Man that came by George Packer that came out a couple of years ago. It was a great biography, one of the best biographies that year. About somebody who, aside from his own grandiose ideas, was a footnote in history. You never know. It's not the size of the person on the world stage that will dictate it. It's the magic interaction between the biographer and the subject. So who knows? Also, who is your favorite known Jack the Ripper suspect? I prefer Charles Lechmere Cross and Joseph Barnett. I have a suspect. It's a long, long discussion. I should do a video on Jack the Ripper, a series of them. And which of your favorite authors could you beat up? Pretty sure I could take Andrew Martin. Alan Black says, number 1, thoughts on Danube by Claudio Magris. It's not my kind of writing. It's a little too syrupy for me, a little bit too Sorrows of Young Werther for me. Number 2, is Stephen Runsman's 3 books on the history of the Crusade worth reading? Yes, indeed, very much so. Number 3, any recommendations on really good books about sea turtles? There was a book a long time ago by Archie Carr called So Excellent a Fish, with fish in the Elizabethan spelling, F-I-S-H-E, that was really good. So Excellent a Fish is really good. I'm pretty sure it's not in print anymore, but maybe you could find a used copy. Question number 4, you often say you were socialized by dogs growing up. What breed of dogs did you have when you were a child? Beagles. An endless row of beagles. Endless numbers of beagles. And some big farm dogs, but beagles. Question number 5, thoughts on the unfinished 3rd Gormenghast book. I found it very jarring, and I struggled through it, but loved the preceding 2 books of the trilogy. Yeah, you sort of have to read it on the afterfumes of loyalty. It worked better for me than it sounds like it did for you, but even so. Dylan McMahon says, hello, Steve. I've started to befriend a very young, misguided 19-year-old who's obsessed with anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, racist pseudoscience, and theocratic political views. He's very kind to me, but his views are deeply disturbing. I want to try to guide him elsewhere, but at points it seems futile. Should I stop? Should I keep trying? Any tips on redirecting him to more rational views? I admire you for what you're doing, but I need to know more about the boy to know what approach to take. It's always a good idea to... Well, I know it's not always a good idea because I don't know the boy. I don't know the circumstance. I don't know, for instance, the degree of danger you're in. Or how bad it is. Or what other psychological elements might be involved that you're not mentioning or maybe you don't even know. Typically speaking, in a large number of cases, a good approach with these kinds of young men is to make them aware of the fact that they are being marks. They're being fleeced by grifters. They're being laughed at by people who are trying to indoctrinate them, because the indoctrination itself is not legitimate. It's not real. At the age that we're talking about here, 19, between the ages of 18 and 25, the idea of being taken as a mark is a strong motivator. You do not want that. They do not want that. And making them aware of that fact will have a big effect, usually. But I need to know more about the person. Feel free to email me. For the time being, beware of your own safety. It's not for nothing that it's this demographic that does mass shootings. In the isolated instance where that might be true, be careful that you're watching for yourself as well. But feel free to email me. CVBN457 is back. Steve, I'm a horror junkie. I know horror isn't your thing, but could you suggest a few contemporary horror writers that are actually good? Nope. Ravens fan 1961. Steve, how is it that new Tom Clancy books are still coming out when he passed away 8 years ago? He became a commodity, a brand. And Robert Parker did. Daniel Steele will, I'm sure. There are a bunch of others. Nora Roberts, I'm sure, will be a brand. I call it necrofiction because the person whose name is on the book is long since gone. And the publisher has long since discarded even the tissue of saying, the writer's working off an outline or a rediscovered manuscript or something like that. At most, I view it now as just a promise on the book cover's part that you will be re-entering that author's world. And as that promise is true. That is not lying. Maybe I can understand why the dead author's name is so big on the cover. I can't help but think that there is another, maybe less economical, but more honest way to signal that to the reader. That this is a Jack Ryan or a Jack Ryan Jr. novel, that you'll be re-entering that world, even though the author is long gone. But then again, I don't know. The alternative would be to set books in that world and not have the original author's name big as life on the cover. And the instances where that happens, like for instance Brian Herbert's Dune books, are even worse. That's an even worse example of what's going on. Because they've succeeded in fooling an entire generation of readers into thinking that these are somehow Dune books. So that's how he does it, because his publisher decided to make him a brand. And for good or ill, that is going to happen more often. So let's see here. Elizabeth Power says, what do you think of the novel March by Geraldine Brooks? I loved it so much when I read it a couple of months ago. Yeah, it's wonderful. Jasper Cater says, sorry, Steve, I have another question. I've never read any Russian literature, but I've heard quite good things about it. Really? Have you? I feel it's obvious to start with Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, but where do I go from there? Nabokov, maybe. Or maybe not. There's plenty of other Russian writers. Start with short stories by Chekhov. Or a short novel by Turgenev. There's no reason to go to Nabokov. You can stick with the greats. Bass Van Dyke says, hi, Steve. What are your thoughts on Ben Wilson's Metropolis, a history of the city? I liked it fairly well. It has dull spots, but I liked it. Hannah's Books says, I know you love Anthony Trollope and his Barsetshire series, but what do you think of Angela Thirkell's Barsetshire series? I love them. I think they're really good. They're very comfortable. Very comfortable books, usually about very little, usually about nothing, but lovely done. And there was a uniform reissue of them that made them look just beautiful. Oh my God. Probably you could go online and get that uniform trade paperback set with matching cover art. I don't remember the cover artist's name. You could probably get that on eBay or Abe in a box set and never run out of goodies to read and reread. They are infinitely rereadable, like Trollope himself. Nicholas says, hello, Steve. Could you please give us your thoughts on Rabelais, both as a writer and as a man? How does he compare to your beloved Erasmus? Is there a work of his that would be a good place to start? Well, I didn't actually know him, so I can't give you my thoughts on him as a man. But obviously you want to read Gargantua and Pantagruel. Right? That is a world classic. Just find the Penguin classic of that or whatever classic of it is at your library and read that. You obviously want to read that. Michael Lombardo says, now that your transformation of Hyde Villetta is almost complete, how soon before we see some of the results? You will never see the results. I will gladly point them out to you if you come over for wine and calzones, but I'm not going to do a visual tour of this place. Gerald's Bliss says, hey, hi Steve, onward to 13K. Why are you so vociferously opposed to smoking/tobacco addiction? Have you ever tried it yourself? What advice do you have for someone to convince a loved one to drop this disgusting habit? There is no way to get someone to stop, even if they seriously want to themselves. It's the hardest addiction to break. It's universally socially reinforced, and that is a big component of addiction. Everywhere you turn, anywhere you look, you are being strongly encouraged to addict yourself to this chemical. And that's hard. That's very hard to break when something is like that. But the reason I'm against it, aside from the fact that at least normal smoking, it seriously endangers everyone around you. It's not just you giving yourself lung cancer. It's that you're seriously upping the chances that everyone around you gets lung cancer. That is pretty monstrous. It's pretty monstrous that the strength of your addictive compulsion forces you to endanger the lives of people you claim to like or even love. That's pretty awful right there. But also, another element of it that I hate, another element of it that pushes it a lot closer towards the category of a sin for me, is that no one does it innocently. No one ever addicts themselves to these chemicals thinking, well, these aren't addictive, or they aren't harmful to me and other people, or it'll be easy to stop. This is not 1919. Everyone, in order to acquire a tobacco addiction, you have to know exactly what you're doing. You have to know that it is an entirely bad idea with literally no upsides. And you do it anyway. Because you are a stooge to cultural packaging by big tobacco, funneling money through TV and movies to make it look cool. And then you're stuck forever, for the rest of your life. So I've never done it myself. No, I can smell it. If you could smell it, you wouldn't do it either. And I don't know what advice to give you to someone who has this habit. It's almost impossible to break. No matter what people say, I've heard a number of young people, especially young men between the ages of 18 and 25, I know, who are compulsive, I mean hard, coarsened, wizened tobacco addicts at age 19 or 20, who, when I meet them again at 25, say, oh, I stopped. It was no big deal. That is a lie. That's not how drug addiction works. So either you went through the refining fire of the worst personal struggle of your entire life and you're not telling me about it, or you're still addicted. One way or another. Those are some of the reasons why I hate it. Thomas says, hi Steve, thoughts on Terry Goodkind, Terry Brooks, and Terry Pratchett? I'm not particularly fond of any one of them. Terry Brooks has a chance, he has a shot. I'm going to be rereading the Shannara, first 3 or 4 Shannara books later this year. But the others, I'm not a fan. Frederick says, thoughts on High Rise, thoughts on J.G. Ballard, thoughts on Howard Wilson conspiracy, thoughts on Slavoj Žižek, thoughts on David Starkey, thoughts on a Q&A. Thoughts on a Q&A. What am I supposed to say here? This one's a 5. This one's a 7 if he could only attend to his wardrobe. This one would be a 10 if he hit the gym. This last question might be difficult for you to answer, being a 28-year-old with rakish good looks. But what advice do you have on aging gracefully? Are collagen supplements the key? This is not graceful. The key to aging gracefully is not to care about what you look like. But not caring about what you look like is the key to living gracefully as well. if you don't care what you look like, beyond being presentable, I'm not saying, never clean yourself, but if you don't have any vain element involved in your physical attractiveness to the outside world in general, then you will age gracefully. And if you do care whether or not strangers in a parking lot find you attractive on first glance, then you will not age gracefully. You will be an embarrassment. So my strong advice would be don't care. Let's see here. Scott Pearson says, you have nothing to worry about when you are backed up by Superman and the Bean. Yes, I've moved the owl. I didn't do it myself. The pictures went back up on the walls, and this went here instead of where it used to be. What are your impressions on the following science fiction authors? This really doesn't work for Q&A. It really doesn't. Who have we got here? Gregory Benford, average. I've never been a real fan. David Brin, I mostly like his great stuff. I think he's written a lot more than he should. John Varley, a brilliant author. I wish there were an accessible version of his great trilogy in print. And Harlan Ellison. I likewise ditto. I wish the Essential Ellison were always in print. Cool Bean says, aside from you, of course, my favorite booktuber is Benjamin McAvoy. Have you ever watched any of his videos, and what did you think of their content? I have watched him. I like his content. I'd love to see your reaction to one of his more popular videos, for example, how to read great imaginative literature. Definitely not a dude bro. Okay, definitely not a dude bro, maybe, but not genuine. Right? Not completely genuine either. He's very much a television presenter. He's very much here's a top 10 list of amazing things about French literature. Number 5 will really shock you. That sort of thing. And also, he tends to be a little bit too explicit of the teacher for me to really be able to get through his videos. I'm not on BookTube to be taught anything about literature, especially by someone as old as the socks I have on right now. And that tends to crop up. That attitude tends to bother me no matter what, not just with him, but with anybody. When a booktuber, especially booktube, because books are something I know, they're a subject that I know, if a booktuber gets on and is obviously the teacher at the front of a classroom, I generally won't watch again. I won't usually go back because that's extremely off-putting. It's extremely condescending to an audience you don't know anything about. I get that vibe with him, so I don't tend to watch a lot of his videos. How are we doing for time? Oh, let's do one more. Bobby Joe says, why does the phrase saints cause trouble for the rest of us come to mind when I see you referred to as St. Donoghue? Actually, I've come across that phrase twice in recent reading, and even after a cursory internet search, cannot determine its origin. Does it have its own literary origin of which you are aware? I don't know of any origin for that phrase. It seems so bland that I can't imagine it would have an origin story. Leo Percar says, hello, Steve. Do you like the Mythago Wood series by Robert Holstock? I do. Be any more than like, but I do. Do you like the TV series / comic book The Boys? Is there other comics, dark satire that you like? Well, I like the TV series of The Boys because it's brilliantly done. I don't like satire in comic books, in superhero comic books. No, not at all. My superhero comic books, completely straight up. No irony, no satire. RTL LTR says, favorite Jules Verne book, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Number 2, can you recommend a War and Peace translation? Well, no, it would depend on what you like. I would recommend, my standard approach for translations of just anything is find a bunch of them. Libraries are good for this. What's the matter, baby? You want to pop back up there? All right, up you go. Find a bunch of translations of a particular work, sit down and read the first little bit in a row, and note which one you get along with the most, and use that. Go with that. No winner in that contest will ever be so bad that you will not get any sense of the original. So even if you pick a translator who's maybe not making the same decisions I would make, who's maybe not well regarded, you'll still be well on your way. You'll still know the work well enough so you can pick another translator. But you're going to be spending a lot of time with a translator. So for War and Peace, I would make your own preference. Don't go with anybody else's. So go to your local university library or whatever and line up 6 translations and stick with the one that you like. And if you don't have a good used bookstore nearby and you find the one you like, let me know. I will find you a copy of whatever War and Peace it is. Let's see here. Declan Steger says, hola, senor. Guess we won't see a library tour until construction is wrapped. But have any World War II or World War I books been added to your shelves since last you filmed? I have no idea when last I filmed. Probably quite a few have, yes, but I don't know. Well, I would have to start library tour all over again. Nothing is where it was before. Uh, Gunnar says, you mentioned Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman many times. What do you think of Stalingrad? Is it good? Is it as good? It probably is as good. It's tough for it to capture that special romance of the first encounter with Life and Fate. Probably it would have had a greater effect on me if I'd read it first. But it's very, very good. Yes, all kudos to the New York Review of Books for doing it. Then let's see here. Well, we only have, it looks like we only have a few more questions. Let's just keep going. Choco says, should I read the book Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace? No. Cool Bean says, In Search of Lost Time by Proust or The Corrections by Jonathan Franzen? Again, you're just mentioning two things. I have no idea what the context is here, so there's no way for me to answer. Which is longer? Which was originally written in English? Which author lived longer? I don't have any idea what you're asking. You have to ask a question for me to get an answer here. Harrison Helms says, what languages do you read and how did you learn them? I read a few languages and I learn them usually by doing. The only real way to learn a language is by doing. Use it. Learn the rudiments, maybe. That'll be easy to do. And then use the rudiments and get better at them. James Holder says, what are your thoughts on Tom Holland, the historian, not the actor? Do you still subscribe to National Geographic? I don't subscribe to National Geographic. It lapsed, and I haven't got a reminder card at all. I need to do that. My old approach, if a magazine subscription lapsed, was that I would go to the huge newsstand of Barnes & Noble in the Prudential Center and take a little subscription card out of one of the magazines and put it in the mail. But that store is closed. That newsstand is gone. Boston does not have a newsstand now, and it doesn't have a retail bookstore now. So I should probably go online and kick the ball in motion. And as to Tom Holland, you don't want me to talk about the actor? The pint-sized tobacco addict actor? I have a lot of thoughts on the actor. but on the historian, I like him. I've never really been blown away by anything that he's done. Mary Manson says, you apparently have a very strong bond with dogs. How did that come about? They effectively raised and socialized me as a wee tadpole. Humans had their hand in it, but it was largely dogs. And that has just stayed true. I absolutely love them. I spend a huge amount of time with my own dogs, but when I'm outside, I stop, I swerve, I pause for any dog at any time, unless I'm walking with a guest, in which case I will sort of control myself. But if I'm on my own, oh no. No. PHX SNS1 says, what do you think of Scott Smith's books, A Simple Plan and The Ruins? I really like The Simple Plan, and I love The Ruins. I wish I had a copy of The Ruins. What a novel. Oh my. You get the gist of some of the horror elements in the very good movie that was made of The Ruins, but you don't get a sense of the atmosphere at all. Or a little bit. But the book is a masterful performance in creating mood. I loved it. Wish I could find a copy. I'm sure it will turn up at the Brown. And finally, Elizabeth Power asks, have you ever done any acting? No. Amateur acting for, if a friend's putting on a production and they need somebody in the cast they don't have to worry about, so they can worry about other people, little things like that. Community amateur stuff, but nothing more than that, no. It was never hard because I don't get stage fright, and I have a really good memory. So a couple of the key elements involved in acting were already present, but nothing more than that, no. With a face like this, the offers aren't exactly coming in hot and heavy. But anyway, that is a 12.9K Q&A, and that is wonderful. We got this done in, I think, 3 videos. So I'm going to wrap this up. I want to end it here by thanking you all, of course. I make fun of the subscriber count growing on this channel, but I'm also incredibly touched by it. So thank you all, and we will do this again. So I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.